Hi guys, today we're going to be finishing book 3. So we will read chapters 30 to 33. It's actually 4 chapters today, so look at that when you're doing your comprehension. Chapter 30, To the Dungeon. At the castle, for the first time in her young life, Midge had enough to eat, and eat she did. She quickly became plump and then plumper still. She grew rounder and rounder and bigger, only her head stayed small. Reader, as the teller of this tale, it is my duty from time to utter some hard and rather disagreeable truths. In the spirit of honesty, then, I must inform you that Midge was the tiniest bit lazy, and too, she was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. That is, she was a bit slow-witted. Because of these shortcomings, Louise was hard-pressed to find a job that Midgery So could effectively perform. In quick succession, Midge failed as a lady-in-waiting. She was caught trying on the gown of a visiting duchess. A seamstress, she sewed the cloak of the riding master to her own frock and ruined both. And as a chambermaid, sent to clean a room, she stood open-mouthed and delighted, admiring the gold walls and floors and tapestries, exclaiming over and over again, "Gor, ain't it pretty? Gor, ain't it something?" And did no cleaning at all. And while Midge was trying and failing at these many domestic chores, other important things were happening in the castle. The rat in the dungeon below was pacing and muttering in the darkness, waiting to take his revenge on the princess. And upstairs in the castle, the princess had met a mouse, and the mouse had fallen in love with her. Will there be consequences? You bet. Just as Midge's inability to perform any job well had its consequences. For, finally, as a last resort, Louise sent Midge to the kitchen, where Cook had a reputation for dealing effectively with difficult help. In Cook's kitchen, Midge dropped eggshells in the pound cake batter. She scrubbed the kitchen floor with cooking oil instead of cleanser. She sneezed directly on the king's pork chop moments before it was to be served to him. "Of all the good-for-nothings I have encountered," shouted Cook, "surely you are the worst, the most cauliflower-eared, the good-for-nothingest. There's only one place left for you, the dungeon." "Eh?" said Midge, cupping a hand around her ear. "You are being sent to the dungeon. You are to take the jailer his noonday meal. That will be your duty from now on. Reader, you must know that the mice of the castle feared the dungeon. Must I tell you that the humans feared it too? Certainly it was never far from their thoughts. In the warm months, a foul odor rose out of its dark depths and permeated the whole of the castle. And in the still, cold nights of winter, terrible howls issued from the dark place, as if the castle itself were weeping and moaning. "It's only the wind," the people of the castle assured each other. "Nothing but the wind." Many a serving girl had been sent to the dungeon bearing the jailer's meal, only to return white-faced and weeping, hands trembling, teeth chattering, insisting that they would never go back. And worse, there were whispered stories of those servant girls who had been given the job of feeding the jailer, who had gone down the stairs and into the dungeon, and who had never been seen or heard from again. Do you believe that this will be Midge's fate? Gor, I hope not. What kind of story would this be without Midge? "Listen, you cauliflower-eared fool," shouted Cook. "This is what you do. You take the tray of food down to the dungeon and you wait for the old man to eat the food, and then you bring the tray back up. Do you think that you can manage that?" I reckon so," said Midge. "I take the old man the tray and he eats what's on it, and then I bring the tray back up. Empty it would be then. I bring the empty tray back up from the deep downs." "That's right," said Cook. "Seems simple, don't it? But I'm sure you'll find a way to bungle it." "Eh?" said Midge. "Nothing," said Cook. "Good luck to you. You'll be needing it." She watched as Midge descended the dungeon stairs. They were the very same stairs, reader, that the mouse Despereaux had been pushed down the day before. Unlike the mouse, however, Midge had a light. On the tray with the food, there was a single flickering candle to show her the way. She turned on the stairs and looked back at Cook and smiled. "That cauliflower-eared, good-for-nothing fool," said Cook, shaking her head. "What's to become of someone who goes into the dungeon smiling, I ask you?" Reader, for the answer to Cook's question, you must read on. Chapter 31, A Song in the Dark. The terrible foul odor of the dungeon did not bother Midge. Perhaps that is because sometimes when Uncle was giving her a good clout to the ear, he missed his mark and delivered a good clout to Midge's nose instead. This happened often enough that it interrupted the proper workings of Midge's olfactory senses. And so it was that the overwhelming stench of despair and hopelessness and evil was not at all discernible to her, and she went happily down the twisting and turning stairs. "Gore!" she shouted. "It's dark, ain't it?" "Yes, it is, Midge," she answered herself. "But if I was a princess, I would be so glittery light, there wouldn't be a place in the world that was dark to me." At this point, Midgery Sow broke into a little song that went something like this. "I ain't the Princess P, but someday I will be. The P-ha-he, someday I will be." Midge, as you can imagine, wasn't much of a singer, more of a bellower, really. But in her little song, there was, to the rightly tuned ear, a certain kind of music. And as Midge went singing down the stairs of the dungeon, there appeared from the shadows a rat, wrapped in a cloak of red and wearing a spoon on his head. "Yes, yes," whispered the rat. "A lovely song, just the song I've been waiting to hear." And Roscuro quietly fell in step beside Midgery Sow. At the bottom of the stairs, Midge shouted out into the darkness, "Gore, it's me, Midgery Sow. Most calls me Midge, delivering your food. Come and get it, Mr. Deep Downs." There was no response. The dungeon was quiet, but it was not quiet in a good way. It was quiet in an ominous way. It was quiet in the way of small, frightening sounds. There was the snail-like slither of water oozing down the walls, and from around a darkened corner, there came the low moan of someone in pain. And then, too, there was the noise of the rats going about their business, their sharp nails hitting the stones of the dungeon, and their long tails dragging behind them through the blood and muck. Reader, if you were standing in the dungeon, you would certainly hear all of these disturbing and ominous sounds. If I were standing in the dungeon, I would hear these sounds. If we were standing together in the dungeon, we would hear these sounds and we would be very frightened. We would cling to each other in our fear. But what did Midgery Sow hear? That's right, absolutely nothing. And so she was not afraid at all, not in the least. She held the tray up higher and the candle shed its weak light on the towering pile of spoons and bowls and kettles. "Gore," said Midge. "Look at them things. I ain't never imagined there could be so many spoons in the whole wide world." "There is more to this world than anyone could imagine," said a booming voice from the darkness. "True, true," whispered Roscuro. "The old jailer speaks true." "Gore," said Midge. "Who said that?" And she turned in the direction of the jailer's voice. Chapter 32, Beware of the Rats. The candlelight on Midge's tray revealed Gregory limping toward her, the thick rope tied around his ankle, his hands outstretched. "You," Gregory presumes, "have brought food for the jailer." "Gore," said Midge. She took a step backward. "Give it here," said Gregory, and he took the tray from Midge and sat down on an overturned kettle that had rolled free from the tower. He balanced the tray on his knees and stared at the covered plate. "Gregory assumes that today again there is no soup?" "Eh?" said Midge. "Soup!" shouted Gregory. "Illegal!" shouted Midge back. "Most foolish," muttered Gregory as he lifted the cover off the plate. "Too foolish to be born, a world without soup." He picked up a drumstick and put the whole of it in his mouth and chewed and swallowed. "Here," said Midge, staring hard at him. "You forgot the bones." "Not forgotten, chewed." "Gore," said Midge, staring at Gregory with respect. "You eat the bones? You are most ferocious." Gregory ate another piece of chicken, a wing, bones and all, and then another. Midge watched him admiringly. "Someday," she said, moved suddenly to tell this man her deepest wish, "I will be a princess." At this pronouncement, Chiaroscuro, who was still at Midge's side, did a small, deliberate jig of joy. In the light of the one candle, his dancing shadow was large and fearsome indeed. "Gregory sees you," Gregory said to the rat's shadow. Roscuro ceased his dance. He moved to hide beneath Midge's skirt. "Eh?" shouted Midge. "What's that?" "Nothing," said Gregory. "So you aim to be a princess? Well, everyone has a foolish dream. Gregory, for instance, dreams of a world where soup is legal. And that rat, Gregory is sure, has some foolish dream too." "If only you knew," whispered Roscuro. "What?" shouted Midge. Gregory said nothing more. Instead, he reached into his pocket and then held his napkin up to his face and sneezed into it once, twice, 3 times. "Bless you," shouted Midge. "Bless you, bless you." "Back to the world of light," Gregory whispered. And then he balled the napkin up and placed it on the tray. "Gregory is done," he said, and he held the tray out to Midge. "Done, are you? Then the tray goes back upstairs. Cook says it must. You take the tray to the deep downs, you wait for the old man to eat, and then you bring the tray back. Them's my instructions." "Did they instruct you, too, to beware of the rats?" "The what?" "The rats." "What about 'em?" "Beware of them," shouted Gregory. "Right," said Midge. "Beware of the rats." Roscuro, hidden beneath Midge's skirts, rubbed his front paws together. "Warn her all you like, old man," he whispered. "My hour has arrived. The time is now, and your rope must break. No nibbling this time. Rather, a serious chew that will break it in two. Yes, it's all coming clear. Revenge is at hand." Chapter 33, A Rat Who Knows Her Name. Midge had climbed the dungeon stairs and was preparing to open the door to the kitchen when the rat spoke to her. "May I detain you for a moment?" Midge looked to her left and then to her right. "Down here," said Roscuro. Midge looked at the floor. "Gore," she said, "but you're a rat, ain't ya? And didn't the old man just warn me of such?" "Beware of the rats," he said. She held the tray up higher, so the light from the candle shone directly on Roscuro and the golden spoon on his head and the blood-red cloak around his neck. "There is no need to panic, none at all," said Roscuro. As he talked, he reached behind his back, and using the handle, he raised the soup spoon off his head, much in the manner of a man lifting his hat to a lady. "Gore," said Midge, "a rat with manners." "Yes," said Roscuro. "How do you do?" "My papa had some cloth much like yours, Mr. Rat," said Midge. "Red like that. He traded me for it." "Ah," said Roscuro, and he smiled, a large, knowing smile. "Ah, did he really? That is a terrible story, a tragic story." Reader, if you will pardon me, we must pause for a moment to consider a great and unusual thing, a portentous thing. That great, unusual, portentous thing is this. Roscuro's voice was pitched perfectly to make its way through the tortuous path of Midge's broken down cauliflower ears. This to say, dear reader, Midgery Sow heard, perfect and true, every single word the rat Roscuro uttered. "You have known your share of tragedy," said Roscuro to Midge. "Perhaps it is time for you to make the acquaintance of triumph and glory." "Triumph?" said Midge. "Glory?" Allow me to introduce myself, said Roscuro. I am Chiaroscuro. Friends call me Roscuro, and your name is Midgery Sow. And it is true, is it not, that most people call you simply Midge. Ain't that the thing, shouted Midge. A rat who knows my name. Miss Midgery, my dear, I do not want to appear too forward so early in our acquaintance, but may I inquire, am I right in ascertaining that you have aspirations? What do you mean aspirations? Shouted Midge. Miss Midgery, there is no need to shout, none at all. As you can hear me, so I can hear you. We two are perfectly suited each to the other. Roscuro smiled again, displaying a mouthful of sharp yellow teeth. Aspirations, my dear, are those things that would make a serving girl wish to be a princess. Gor, agreed Midge. A princess is exactly what I want to be. There is, my dear, a way to make that happen, I believe. That there is a way to make that dream come true. You mean that I could be the Princess P? Yes, your highness, said Roscuro. And he swept the spoon off his head and bowed deeply at the waist. Yes, your most royal Princess P. Gor, said Midge. May I tell you my plan? May I illustrate for you how we can make your dream of becoming a princess a reality? Yes, said Midge, yes. It begins, said Roscuro, with yours truly and the chewing of a rope. Midge held the tray with the one small candle burning bright, and she listened as the rat went on, speaking directly to the wish in her heart. So passionately did Roscuro speak, and so intently did the serving girl listen, that neither noticed as the napkin on the tray moved. Nor did they hear the small mouse-like noises of disbelief and outrage that issued from the napkin, as Roscuro went on unfolding step by step his diabolical plan to bring the princess to darkness. This is the end of the third book. You will finish your comprehension up until book 4, and you will do your test on book 3 tomorrow. And then I will see you again Wednesday when we start the last book, book 4.